Chinese war fleet ambushes America's largest offshore rig, but pays the ultimate price. September 12, 2025. In the tense darkness of the South China Sea, Beijing launched a daring strike that should never have happened. The target, the United States Freedom Rig, a 400-feet tall offshore platform weighing over 120,000 tons, guarded by a Marine garrison just miles away. From the horizon, a 65,000-ton Chinese aircraft carrier, 6 Type 52D destroyers, and 4 frigates advanced in formation. Their arsenal was staggering: 10 cruise missiles, 5 electronic warfare aircraft, and 10 bomber jets loaded with more than 40,000 lob of ordnance, enough firepower to wipe out an entire city. On paper, it was a perfect ambush. China's plan was to blind American radar with 120 gigawatts of jamming power defenses and humiliate Washington by destroying its strategic energy hub. The message to the world was meant to be clear. The South China Sea belongs to Beijing, but arrogance can be fatal. Within minutes, the night sky erupted in a battle that would leave thousands dead, billions of dollars in warships sunk, and the balance of power in Asia shaken forever. So, how did the United States fight back under total electronic blackout? How were missiles stopped when the radars went dark? I will show you the truth right now. September 12, 2025. At precisely 3:15 a.m. local time, the still waters of the South China Sea broke under the shadow of a fleet that should never have been there. The People's Liberation Army Navy had dispatched one of its most formidable task forces, a 65,000-ton aircraft carrier, 6 Type 52D guided missile destroyers, and 4 Dang Kai-class frigates advancing in tight formation like predators circling their prey. Their destination was chillingly clear: the United States Freedom Rig, the largest strategic offshore platform in Asia, defended by a forward-deployed U.S. Marine garrison just 48 nautical miles away. At 3:27 a.m., the first phase began. 10 long-range cruise missiles streaked into the night sky, programmed to obliterate the American outpost. 5 Y-9 electronic warfare aircraft swooped in behind them, flooding the spectrum with more than 120 gigawatts of interference, blinding the very radar systems designed to watch the skies. And finally, the Hammer, 100 JH-7 fighter bombers roared low, each armed with a payload of 4,000 lb ordnance meant to finish the job. On paper, it was a perfect ambush, a strike worth nearly $500 million in munitions, all hurled at one target, a bold attempt to America's energy lifeline and humiliate its military presence. Beijing's message was unmistakable: the South China Sea belongs to China. But history has shown that arrogance on the battlefield is the quickest path to disaster. Even as the Chinese commanders celebrated prematurely inside the American garrison, a different story was unfolding. For every missile fired, there was a countermeasure waiting. For every jet in the sky, there was a gunner on the ground, ready to fight by hand if necessary. Do you think the Chinese military could destroy the US military's radar system? Let me know in the comments. At 3:29 a.m. the unimaginable happened. The cutting-edge ANSPY-6 radar arrays protecting the Freedom Rig and its garrison blinked once, then flatlined into darkness. For a chilling 5 seconds, the outpost went blind. The Chinese jammers had done their job, or so Beijing thought. Inside the US command post, the room pulsed with red emergency lights. Monitors flickered, systems froze, and electronic defenses collapsed one by one. Yet the American response was anything but chaos. Colonel James Marston, a veteran of 2 decades of Middle East and Pacific deployments, slammed his fist on the table and gave a single order: switch to manual, fight by hand. What happened next stunned even the most hardened Marines. Teams of forward observers climbed to rooftop positions with thermal scopes and laser rangefinders. Gear worth just a few thousand compared to the 20 million Chinese jamming suit. Anti-air batteries, now blind to radar, were guided by human eyes and battlefield instincts. Every operator was trained for this nightmare scenario, and tonight training became reality. At 3:32 am, the first missile slashed through the darkness, streaking toward the garrison at nearly 550 miles. Private Sanchez, just 22 years old, called out the trajectory. Seconds later, a Stinger missile launcher barked fire. Direct hit. A blinding explosion lit the night sky as the 2 million Chinese missile was erased by a 120,000 American counter-rocket. One after another, the incoming salvos were cut down. By 3:36 a.m., 9 of the 10 cruise missiles had been destroyed mid-flight, and 7 out of 10 Chinese fighter bombers were burning wreckage over the South China Sea. The defenders had turned their manual defenses into an invisible wall, performing at an efficiency rate of nearly 90% interception, a figure military analysts once thought impossible without radar. But victory came at a price. One missile slipped closer than anyone expected, detonating less than 300 yards from the Freedom Rig's perimeter. The blast wave tore through sandbags and shattered windows. 5 Marines were injured, 2 suffering severe burns, 3 left with ruptured eardrums. One sergeant would never hear again in his right ear, a permanent reminder of how close the base came to annihilation. The battle's first phase was over. China had fired $500 million worth of steel and fire into the night, and all they had to show for it was failure. Yet in Washington, the mood was not relief, but fury. Retaliation was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. The Chinese plan was perfect, but look how the US military turned it into child's play. Before you know what the US military will do, please support us by liking and subscribing to the channel. By 3:45 a.m., the smoke had barely cleared when US cyber analysts pulled the first hard data. Every missile fragment, every jamming pulse carried a signature. Within 7 minutes, triangulation from satellites, P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft, and underwater hydrophones all pointed in the same direction. A Chinese strike group less than 180 nautical miles away, operating in international waters, but brazenly within striking range of the Freedom Rig. The numbers told a chilling story. The task force's firepower alone exceeded $4.2 billion in assets. A 65,000-ton carrier, 6 destroyers, each bristling with 64 vertical launch cells and 4 frigates providing layered defense. On their decks, more than 40 J-15 fighters capable of delivering another 100 tons of ordnance in a second wave. Beijing had gambled that one decisive strike could humiliate Washington and establish absolute dominance in the South China Sea. Instead, the opposite happened. In Washington, the Pentagon's secure lines lit up. At 4:02 a.m., the chairman of the Joint Chiefs briefed the president. "We have confirmation. The attack came from the Chinese fleet." The response was immediate. Submarines lurking under the Philippine Trench were ordered into firing positions. 3 EA-ATG Growlers fitted with next-generation jamming pods worth $90 million each lifted off from Guam, and in silos across the Pacific coast, 2 ballistic missiles, each with a warhead packing the force of 500,000 lb of TNT, were placed on 5-minute standby. The political fallout was already seismic. Beijing had crossed a line not seen since Pearl Harbor. This was no longer a skirmish. It was an open act of war, and America's answer would not be measured. It would be overwhelming. Come with me now into the heart of the battle and witness the American military's fury. At 4:28 a.m., the ocean itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, like thunder from the deep, the retaliation began. From 200 feet below the Philippine Trench, the USS Louisiana and Ohio's nuclear submarine unleashed 20 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Each missile carried a 1,000 lb high explosive warhead ripping upward through the surface, streaking toward the Chinese fleet at nearly 550 miles. Simultaneously, from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, 3 EA-18G Growlers pierced the night sky. Their jamming pods blanketed a 400 m radius with electronic chaos, severing the fleet's ability to coordinate defenses. Overhead, swarms of 300 Switchblade and Phoenix Ghost UAVs, each armed with armor-piercing charges, moved like a living cloud of steel and fire, programmed to dive straight into radar domes, missile silos, and gun turrets. At 4:36 am, the first wave struck. The Chinese fleet roared to life, deploying HQ-9 surface-to air missiles and experimental laser cannons mounted on their destroyers. In the opening minutes, more than 180 UAVs were cut down, burning debris raining into the sea. But numbers don't lie. 120 drones slipped through overwhelming close-in weapon systems. One after another, they slammed into CWS turrets, radar arrays, and the bridge of a Type Aero 52D destroyer. Within 3 minutes, the ship was ablaze, its ammunition storage detonating in a fireball equivalent to 200 tons of TNT. The real hammer came next. At 4:41 a.m., 2 U.S. Army ATEC-MES ballistic missiles launched from Allied bases in the Philippines arced high above the stratosphere before plunging down at Mach 5. The first splashed harmlessly wide, but the second smashed directly into a Zhongkai-class frigate, tearing it in half. Survivors leapt into burning seas as the wreck disappeared beneath the waves. Then came the Tomahawks, Out of 20 fired, 12 were intercepted, but 8 made it through. 4 slammed into the Chinese carrier Shandong, ripping open its flight deck, igniting nearly 60,000 gallons of jet fuel and flipping parked J-15 fighters into twisted wreckage. Flames consumed the hangar deck, and within minutes, command and control on the carrier collapsed. By 4:55 a.m., the once formidable Chinese fleet was in chaos. 2 destroyers crippled, 1 frigate sunk, and the pride of Beijing, its aircraft carrier, bleeding fire across the South China Sea. The message from Washington was unmistakable. America had not only survived the ambush, it had turned the night into a nightmare for China. By 7:10 a.m., the South China Sea was no longer a theater of intimidation. It was a graveyard. The Shandong, Beijing's pride, lay engulfed in flames. On its flight deck, wreckage of more than 30 J-15 fighters, each worth $60 million, burned in a chain reaction that detonated fuel and ordnance across the carrier's core. The heat reached nearly 2,000 degrees, buckling steel plating and forcing commanders to order an emergency abandon ship. Meanwhile, the swarm of American UAVs had done its job. Over 120 drones had pierced defensive layers, and though most were destroyed in suicide dives, they left the Chinese destroyers crippled. 2 Typers 052D warships listed heavily, 1 gutted by internal explosions equivalent to 200 tons of TNT, the other dead in the water after its engines were shredded. At 5:18 am, the final blow came. A second salvo of Tomahawks fired from the U.S. Missouri streaked in low at sea skimming altitude. Out of 10 missiles, 4 broke through. 1 obliterated a Jiang Kai frigate, 2 ripped into the Shandong's command tower, and the last detonated inside a missile magazine. The result was catastrophic, a towering fireball rising more than 600 feet into the sky, visible to fishing villages nearly 80 m away. Casualty figures mounted at a staggering pace. Within 40 minutes, more than 200 Chinese sailors were confirmed dead, another 2,000 wounded or missing. The fleet's surviving vessels limped away, leaving behind burning oil slicks stretching 9 square miles across the sea. In financial terms alone, Beijing had lost nearly $70 billion in hardware in a single night. For Washington, the message was clear. This was no longer about defense of an oil platform. It was about credibility, deterrence, and survival in the Indo-Pacific. Beijing had gambled on humiliation. Instead, it suffered the greatest naval defeat since World War II. As dawn broke over the wreckage, the world took notice. America had not just defended a rig. It had demonstrated that even under electronic blackout, its forces could fight, adapt, and crush an enemy fleet. The Pentagon's official statement carried words that echoed beyond the Pacific. Let this be understood by every adversary. The United States does not start wars, but if attacked, it will finish them. The Dragon fleet had fallen, and the balance of power in Asia had shifted decisively and perhaps permanently. By sunrise on September 12, 2025, the South China Sea had transformed from a chessboard of intimidation into a searing reminder of hard power. The wrecks of China's most advanced warships drifted in silence, oil slicks stretching for miles, while the United States stood unbroken. Beijing's gamble to strike first, blind American systems, and seize dominance ended in flames, shattered steel, and a humiliation broadcast worldwide. Strategists in Washington quickly recognized the magnitude of the moment. This was not just a victory at sea. It was proof that the United States, even under the most sophisticated electronic attack, could still fight, adapt, and prevail against $500 million in Chinese munitions and a $7 billion fleet. American resolve and precision had prevailed at a cost measured not in defeat, but in survival. Yet the price was real. 5 Marines injured, 1 permanently scarred. A human reminder that freedom carries sacrifice. Their courage symbolized the heart of American defense. Technology may falter, but the will of its people never bends. For Beijing, the lesson was brutal. This was more than a naval disaster. It was a warning carved into history. Aggression against the United States and its allies would not secure dominance. It would invite ruin. And for the world, the message was unmistakable. The balance of power in Asia had not shifted toward China. It had been reaffirmed with overwhelming clarity in America's favor. Now I turn the question to you. Was this the night that truly ended China's naval ambitions, or is it just the beginning of a larger storm? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you value in-depth analysis and storytelling like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel. Together, we'll continue uncovering the truth behind the battles shaping our world.